Dear students, how are you? Today we will talk about the first lesson in Unit 2. In the previous lesson, we talked about the mass and weight. So now let's talk about the first lesson in Unit 2, which deal with the heat conduction. At the first, let's know what's meant by the heat energy. The heat energy is a form of energy that transfers from what? From the higher temperature objects to the lower temperature object. Again, what's meant by the heat energy? It's a form of energy that transfer from the higher temperature objects to the lower temperature object. For example, your primary, if you imagine that when you touch a hot cup of tea, when you touch a hot cup of tea, what do you feel? You feel hot. Why primary? Because the heat is transferred from what? From higher temperature object to the lower temperature object. But if I ask you which object with the higher temperature, the cup of tea or your hand? Sure, the cup of tea. So the direction of the heat will become from what to what? From the cup of tea, which has the higher temperature object, to your hand, which has the lower temperature. Okay, what about the importance of heat? The heat is very important in many uses, like what your primary. Number one, used in cooking, warming, drying wash the clothes, and heating water. What about the industry? And the heat also is very important in industry, for food industry and glass industry. What about the temperature? What's meant by temperature? The temperature is the degree of what? Of hotness or coldness of a body, or it's the indicator that help us to express the hotness or coldness of the body. How can we measure the temperature? We can measure the temperature by important device which called thermometer. Okay, in this part there is a give reason. When you touch a hot cup of tea in your hand, you feel hot. As we said here primary. Why? Because the heat transfer from what? From the higher temperature objects to the lower temperature object. Which object with the higher temperature? The cup of tea. Which object with the lower temperature? Your hand. So the direction of heat from cup of tea to your hand. From the cup of tea to your hand. Okay, let's talk about the second point. If I ask you a primary, does all materials conduct heat? Does all materials conduct heat? Sure not. Why? Let's make an activity to know what are the types of materials. If we look here in this picture, if you imagine that we prepare a beaker and put in it boiled water, then I will bring 4 different materials. One of them from wood, and the second one from aluminum, and the third one from plastic, and the fourth one from iron. Okay, then touch each one of them with your finger. Which one of them will conduct heat? Yes, excellent, bravo. We can observe the aluminum and iron conducts heat, but wood and plastic not conducts heat. Wood and plastic not conducts heat. Why primary? Because we have two types of materials. According to heat conductivity. The first type called good conductors of heat, and the second one called bad conductors of heat, which known as insulators. Okay, so again, the materials are classified according to heat conductivity into how many types? 2 types. Number one called good heat conductors, and the second one known as bad heat conductor. What it meant, or what is the difference between good heat conductors and bad heat conductors? The good heat conductors, they are materials that allow heat flow through. They are material that allow heat flow through. Like what your primary? Like iron, copper, aluminum, and mercury. So we can say all metals are good conductor of heat. Not all materials, all metals. All metals are good conductor of heat. Why? Because they allow heat flow through. Because they allow heat flow through. What about the bad heat conductor, which known as insulator? What is the meaning of bad conductors? They are materials that primary don't allow heat flow through. They are the materials that don't allow heat flow through. Like what? Like wood, plastic, paper, glass, and wool. And also a primary like air. Air is bad conductor of heat. Okay, so we can say all non-metals bad conductor of heat. If you remember, in primary 4 we have two types of elements, metal and non-metal. All metals are good conductor of heat, but all non-metals bad conductor of heat. Okay, okay. As we said before, your primary, all metals are good conductor of heat, but not all metals conduct heat with the same degree. Not all metals conduct heat with the same degree. For example, your primary, if you imagine that we prepare a beaker and pour in it boiled water and bring three different metals, one of them from iron and the second one from aluminum, and bring the third one from copper. All of them good conductor of heat, okay, but not all of them conduct heat with the same degree. Why a primary? We can observe that copper conducts heat faster than aluminum, and aluminum conducts heat faster than iron. So the fastest metal in heat conductivity is copper. Again, the fastest metal in heat conductivity is copper, then aluminum, then iron. Okay, a primary? Okay, let's talk about the third point, which is the life application of heat insulators and heat conductors. Life application of heat insulators and heat conductor. At the first, let's talk about the life application of heat insulator. For example, the air. As we said before, the air is good or bad? The air is bad conductor of heat, so it allow heat flow through or don't allow heat flow through. The air don't allow heat flow through. So your primary, in cold countries, the weather in cold countries is very cold, so they make insulating glass window. As you see in this picture, make insulating glass window. This insulating glass window made of two glass sheet. Between them there is a space. This space filled with air. Why primary? Because in cold countries they need to make the houses warm. So your primary, they make the insulating glass window which contain the air. Why? Because air is insulator. So the air will prevent the leakage of heat from inside the house to outside. Again, give reason. Air used in making insulating glass window. Why? Because air is insulators. Because air is insulator, so it will prevent the leakage of heat from inside to outside. So it keeps the house warm. Okay. The second life application will talk about the heat conductor. For example, we will talk about the iron. Look here, your primary, in this picture. These railway bars, railway bars. There is a primary. There is a space between the railway bars. If you observe, between the railway bars, there is a space. Why a primary? Because the railway bar, as we know, made of what? Made of iron. And iron is metal or non-metal? The iron is metal. And as we know, a primary, all metals expand by heat, expands by heat, and contract by cool. So this space will allow the bar air primary expand easily when it become hot. When the bar become hot, it expand easily. Why? Because there is a space between the pores. Okay, so there is a give reason. Give reason says that leaving spaces between the railway bar which made from iron. Leaving spaces between the railway bar which made of iron. Why? To expand in hot weather. To expand in hot weather and avoid what your primary? Avoid train accidents and avoid train accidents. Okay, so your primary slide D, there is two give reason. There are two give reason is very important. One of them for about heat insulator, and the second one about the heat conductors. Okay. Okay, let's talk about the last point in this lesson, which talk about the usage of heat conductors and heat insulator. The usage of heat conductor and heat insulator. At the first, let's talk about the usage of heat conductor. For example, a primary. The heat conductors like aluminum and stainless steel. As we said before, aluminum and stainless steel are good conductor of heat, so they allow heat flow through. So we can use aluminum and steel in making what your primary? Number one, making cooking pots. And number two, used in making kettles. Okay. Type. If I ask you, give reason. Aluminum and steel used in making cooking pots and kettles, not plastic or wood. Why a primary? Because the aluminum and steel are good conductor of heat. Excellent. So they allow heat flow through. They a primary allow heat flow through. Excellent. What about the bad conductors of heat or heat insulator? We take an example about plastic and wood. As we said before, plastic and wood is good or bad? Bad conductor of heat. Wood and plastic are bad conductor of heat. Wood and plastic are bad conductor of heat. So we can use plastic and wood in making what? Number one, handles of cooking pots. Number two, handles of kettles and handles of electric iron. Why? If I ask you, give reason. Plastic and wood used in making handles of cooking pots, not aluminum. Why a primary? Because wood and plastic are bad heat conductors, so they don't allow heat flow through. The third example will talk about the wool. The wool, as we said before, is good or bad? The wool is bad heat conductor. So we can use it in making what? Number one, heavy blankets, and number two, woolen clothes. Why a primary? If I ask you, give reason. Woolen clothes and heavy blankets made of wool. Why a primary? Because the wool is bad conductor of heat, so it will prevent the leakage of heat and keep the body warm. So it prevents the leakage of heat from your body to outside, so it will keep the body warm. Okay, so now we have finished lesson number 1 in unit 2. Goodbye.